All right, good morning. So good to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for the first of a five-part summer series focused on preparing Tennessee students for Tennessee careers. I'm David Mansuri. I have the great honor of serving as the president and CEO at SCORE, and really just wonderful to be with so many partners this morning. Thank you for spending your morning with us. So we know that Tennesseans want access to great jobs that allow them to support themselves and to support their families. We also know that Tennessee's businesses are seeking skilled workers to meet their changing needs. And we know those needs are ever evolving, particularly as the economy evolves. We also know that in our state and really across the country, the workforce has been significantly impacted by the events of the last 3 years. College enrollment continues to decline in many places. We know that not enough young people are completing the skills training required for both the existing jobs in our state and for the jobs that will be coming. So that's why SCORE's launched this five-part summer series to really elevate innovative practices, innovative research from across the country that addresses these challenges to prepare students for high quality and in-demand careers. So throughout this summer series, we'll be bringing together education leaders, business leaders, policymakers, philanthropy, community leaders, civic leaders, for monthly 90-minute conversations to explore a range of topics that examine this education to workforce connection and identify, importantly, how that connection can be reimagined in our state. And so during each institute, we'll hear from a national expert and we will hear from Tennessee leaders reflecting on how some of these innovative practices could play out in our state. We also know that employers are more eager than ever to build partnerships to ensure employees have the skills and training needed to be successful in their businesses. And so that will be a core part of our conversations each month as well. With our state's projected economic growth, our strong policy foundation, commitment to innovation, there's a really unique opportunity for stakeholders in K-12 education, higher education, industry, and communities to really come together to build stronger pathways from education and to work. And just really appreciate you all for being here for this conversation. We also have folks who are joining us virtually as well, and appreciate people taking the time to engage in this conversation. So we're excited to kick off today's event focused on workforce skills, which will really, throughout the conversation today, we'll really explore what types of skills students need to develop in order to obtain high quality, in-demand jobs as part of a career that will enable economic independence and sustain Tennesseans and their families in the future. So this question about skills and skills gaps, I know, is not new news to anyone in this room. I'm sure you've read a lot about this. You've probably experienced some of this in your own work, but want to take just a minute to understand how this plays out in Tennessee. So first, Tennesseans in general are concerned that there is a disconnect between education and work. In February of this year, SCORE released some survey results that looked at Tennessee's opinions about the value of post-secondary education and how the education system in our state is preparing students for the workforce. We saw that Tennesseans overwhelmingly say that high school graduates are not prepared for higher education or for a job. And while many Tennesseans, about 60%, just above 60%, agree that the purpose of post-secondary education is to prepare students for a career, most Tennesseans believe that the right skills are not being taught to prepare students for today's workforce needs. Second, Tennessee employers also report that the education system isn't producing enough graduates with the skills needed to succeed in their industries. So in a recent survey from the Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research, that looked at Tennessee's business leaders, this study found that nearly 7 out of 10 respondents believe that there are not enough appropriately trained workers in our state. Many, about 41%, also think that improving education and training would help expand the supply of prepared workers. And while technical skills are needed, and this really speaks to our conversation today, respondents said that what they found most lacking in job applicants is work ethic, cited by about 67% of respondents, and initiative, just under half of respondents. So today we're going to dig a bit deeper into this conversation around in-demand workforce skills and aligning education to help students learn those skills. We'll hear from a national expert, Tim Taylor, as well as several education and business leaders in Tennessee on how to strengthen this connection between education and work. So Tim Taylor is the co-founder and president of America Succeeds, which is a nonprofit organization committed to improving educational opportunities, outcomes, and equity by harnessing the influence and acumen of the business community and accelerating systems change. And just a few years ago, and Tim will share more about this, the organization undertook a research project with Lightcast, which is formerly known as MC Burning Glass, to analyze millions of online job listings to identify what skills are most in demand in real time by employers across the country. Instead of relying solely on historical data about what skills industries are looking for in workers, this effort explored specifically what skills industries require right now and will be requiring in the future. And what they discovered after examining all these job listings is that across the board, in addition to some of those industry-specific technical skills, employers are seeking to hire workers with durable skills. And you'll hear that term throughout Tim's presentation today. So, what are durable skills? We'll get into that in a bit more detail, but at a high level, durable skills are a combination of how you use what you know and your character skills. They include things like critical thinking, communication, collaboration, as well as character skills like determination, leadership, and ethics. And they're the skills that we take with us from job to job and are essential skills as we move up a career ladder. So last year, after seeing America Succeeds report on the demand for these skills nationally, SCORE and some of our other partners in Tennessee partnered with America Succeeds to conduct a similar analysis on what skills Tennessee's employers are hiring for that we as a state should be focusing on in developing learners as they transition from education into work. So in a minute, I'm going to turn over to Tim to share what America Succeeds has learned about the current skills gap and what those durable skills are, not only nationally, but very specifically to Tennessee, as well as some of the best policy and practice policymakers and educators are using across the country to integrate these skills into educational pathways. Following Tim's remarks, we'll have a bit of time for Q&A. So as you go through the presentation with Tim, there are things that you want to ask more about. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A with Tim after his remarks. And then we're going to turn to a panel of Tennessee leaders, education leaders and business leaders, really to react to some of these findings and to share their own insights on how we might focus on these skills in our work in Tennessee. And I would just say one thing I hope you will take away from the conversation this morning is that having data to inform conversations about talent pipelines and skills gaps is really essential to making any meaningful progress. And I think throughout this SCORE Institute series, I hope we'll be able to have also a larger conversation about whether we have the right data and the right information as a state to answer big policy questions, programmatic questions, implementation questions, funding questions that are related to education and workforce development. So finally, I'm going to now turn it over to Tim Taylor, who's the co-founder and president of America Succeeds, for our keynote presentation this morning. Tim brings a unique background of executive, nonprofit, and public policy experience. He began his career on Capitol Hill as a senior legislative assistant to Congressman and University of Tennessee alum Saxby Chambliss, before serving as an independent political consultant, director of public relations and government affairs for the Colorado Healthcare Association, and founder of Open Fairways, a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the lives of at-risk and underprivileged children through the game of golf. Tim is a fellow of the 14th class of the Aspen Pahar Education Fellowship, is a member of the Aspen Global Leadership Network, and Tim was named one of Getting Smart's 60 people shaping the future of K-12 education, and has appeared on NPR's Talk of the Nation, and has also served as a critical reader for the upcoming Good to Great and K-12 education monograph by author Jim Collins. So please join me in welcoming Tim Taylor.
Good morning. It's great to be here. David, thank you to SCORE, to everybody here. Congratulations on putting together a room like this. This is super impressive to have a conversation with different audiences, different constituencies. So just to check on that, how many folks are from the education world? How many folks from the business community? How many folks consider policymakers, anything others? All right. Well, thank you. This is super fun. I'm going to begin with a quick anecdote. When I wind up in a room like this, every once in a while, I'm reminded of something from years ago when my daughter was starting school. She first went to a half-day kindergarten program, a preschool program, and so at the end of that year, she had the summer off. They went back the following year, and it was a full-day program the following year. A lot of the same kids went through that program. And so on the first day, they went through their routine. They went to get their snack. They came back. One of the little guys in the class went straight over to his cubby, grabbed his backpack, threw his backpack on, headed for the door. And the teacher said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I remember this from last year. We had snack, and then we went home." And she said, "Well, you are now in a full day kindergarten program, and we're only halfway through your day." And he looked up at her with his big eyes and he said, "Who the hell signed me up for this?" So I know that David signed me up for this and think similarly. But at any rate, it's great to be able to share a little bit about our work, what we're doing, what we consider and what we call durable skills, why we call them durable skills. As David mentioned, these durable skills, you take them with you from job to job. You all can think about the careers, the different roles you've had. You may leave the technical skills behind you when you leave, but you always bring these durable skills with you. They last a lifetime. They build entire careers. And if you don't have them, you cannot advance up the career ladder. I sometimes refer to them as the second rung on the career ladder, because there's no way to advance if you're fired from your first job for not having durable skills. Where do you practice them? Where would you ever get them? How would you be able to move through? Some folks call these soft skills. Some people call them 21st century skills. We're agnostic. We work very closely with the business community, and we were trying to bring the business community back into the discussion of what's happening in K through 12 and higher education after we asked them to touch a hot plate over and over again and saying, "That burned me," touch it again, "Nope, that burned me." This was a way to engage them. They understand durable skills. They hate the term soft skills. We're 23 years in the 21st century. Durable skills are skills that last. Although we are agnostic on whatever you want to call them, just teach kids the skills. That's the bottom line of what we're talking about here today. And we'll go into a little bit about why. We think the purpose of education has changed. It's evolving. It is not to maximize education. We all have a phone in our pocket that has the sum total of human knowledge on it. Kids can find information all the time. Can they distinguish good information from bad information? Can they think critically about those problems? Can they collaborate? Can they do those types of things? And if the purpose of education is evolving, then the system has to evolve along with it. And that's the thing that we have to all come together and work on. So again, congratulations to everybody who's here. So here's what we're thinking about durable skills, right? Technical skills are evolving at an unprecedented pace. But these durable skills, as I've mentioned, last a lifetime. As we start to think about AI, ChatGPT, all of those types of things, I was at an event. I'm not even going to say where the state was, and a superintendent raised their hand and they said, "Yeah, but GPT, we've outlawed that in our district." And I just think, have we not learned? We had the calculator. Kids cannot use the calculator. They've got to continue to use the slide rule. They leave and they haven't learned calculation skills using the tool that they will use for the rest of their lives. I remember when the internet showed up. And how many remember you couldn't cite internet sources. You had to go find a book from the library. And now we have kids who can't distinguish good information from bad information because the first reaction was, don't allow that in our schools. And now we're about to have ChatGPT that is going to change the way we do absolutely everything for the rest of these kids' lives. And the first response is, don't let them practice that. Don't let them use it. Don't let them figure out how to separate and learn how to use these tools that are going to be with them for the rest of their lives. I don't know what the next one is, but I'm sure we're going to have the same reaction to when kids show up in school and there's new technology. It's just the initial response. And I think we have to sort of get through that and understand that if the purpose of education is shifting, then what we want kids to be able to know and do with the tools that they're going to encounter for the rest of their lives are able to do. So David mentioned a little bit about this, and the Tennessean examples are great. We cite our own research, but every time it's validated somewhere else, we love to put it out. This is an Association of Talent Development survey. 83% of employers report skills gaps in their current employees. 65% of employers struggle with critical thinking and problem solving. I am sure you all have had similar. We've had employees who have gone to some of the top Ivy League schools in the country who come in and start to work with us. We give them their first assignment and they come back in and they hand us something and their question is it right? I don't know if it's right. We're solving problems about how to change the public education system. And sure, these are big problems that we're thinking through. We don't need to know whether it's right. What we need to know is, how did you think through that problem? What is the next question? What did that lead you to? Where's your curiosity? Can you work with somebody on your team to sort of get through these problems? And they're not practicing that. Kids in our schools don't practice a lot of these skills. And this is something that we'll get to, and something that we're really passionate and excited about, the opportunity of making sure that kids graduate with these types of skills, because they're in such demand by the employers. We have done a lot of things. I'm 20 years into education policy and advocacy work. We have had some bloody fights over things that have been disagreed upon by a lot of people in the community. Making sure kids have these types of skills should not be one of those fights. This is motherhood and apple pie if you don't want your kid to come back and live in your basement. So the first thing we did as we started thinking about this was coming out of the pandemic. We had done a lot of work around what we considered the future of work, trying to predict where jobs were going, right? We had no idea ChatGPT was coming. So I think like the predicting and trying to guess on the technical skills is becoming increasingly futile. I think that what we've also heard from employers, I bet everybody in this room has heard somebody say that, give me somebody who can think critically, collaborate, and I will teach them everything they need to know on the job. They're not seeing it. The employers just aren't getting those skills when kids are coming out of public education systems. And sadly, it's leading to inequities, not enough diversity, and making sure that all kids don't have the same opportunities, because most of us in the room, if I were willing to guess, had opportunities to play sports, to participate in music, to travel, church programs, and I would guess again that most of us learned most of our durable skills through those types of experiences more than we ever learned or practiced them or heard these terms in school. I asked my kids about group work. I said, what did you learn? And they said, well, that Billy's not doing what he's supposed to do in my class. Yes, but you're learning valuable lessons around collaboration and figuring out how to do those things. They'd never heard the term collaboration. They just thought they were doing group work. So we also have to connect the things they're doing in class to the things they're going to see in job descriptions as they exit, and they know that they've practiced those skills, and they can give good examples of how they've use those skills in their everyday experiences. So the first thing we did, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. The first thing we did, we had the hypothesis that these skills were in demand across every industry, regardless of geography, and regardless of education attainment level. So we went to a bunch of associations, Associated Builders and Contractors, SHRM, manufacturers. We worked with hotel and lodging. We worked with CompTIA on the tech side. Not surprising, there is not an industry that says, nope, we don't need this stuff. So we started to feel pretty good about what we were doing and where we were headed with this. And so to David's point, what we wanted to do was go out and collect some really solid information. So we worked with MC Burning Glass, now called Lightcast. What they do is they scrape every job description that's ever hit the internet. They do a lot of predictions for universities or states around job trends. If you're going to hire economists, do you need forensic economists? Do you need tax economists? So they can actually split that down so a school can learn to specialize in a certain area or a state sees trends that are coming. But because they've collected all of these job descriptions, they're a phenomenal resource in being able to sort of look at trends and be able to analyze those. So we looked at everything that was out there: soft skills, essential skills, 21st century skills, whatever the terms were, and we came up with 10 competencies that showed up over and over again. What we then did is put 10 skills around the outside that were sort of synonyms or aligned with whatever the top 10 competencies were. So we wound up with 110 terms. Interestingly, we could expand this out to a... Can I keep going? No? I don't like my speaking voice to begin with. Yeah. All right, I think we got it. Interestingly, if we expanded this out and we actually looked at, so what the, MC Burning Glass did is they actually used 200 terms, 300 terms, 400 terms, and it didn't matter. Once you started to boil it all down, you could pretty much get to what most employers were looking for these 400 terms. Now, not all of these are perfect. Not all of these show up in every job description. Not every employer wants every individual to be able to do every one of these skills, but it was indicative of how often these skills are showing up and these terms are showing up in the workplace. And here's what we found. We looked at 82 million job postings across 22 sectors using SOC codes. 64% of those jobs required at least one durable skill. 7 of the top 10 most requested skills were durable skills. And the top 5 durable skills showed up 3.8 times, almost 4 times more often than the top 5 technical skills that were out there. What was interesting was we were curious, how is it not every job description was asking for some of these skills? And we actually went to a couple of employers, and we went to one very large employer in particular, and we said, we've looked, and only about 14% of your jobs require a durable skill in the job description. And they said, no, you can't work here if you don't have it. From our entry level to our C-suite, we didn't realize we weren't asking for them in our job descriptions. So we think that if you actually look at this and were to dig in a little bit deeper, companies aren't necessarily asking, and so they're also not signaling to the education system what they're really asking for. The World Economic Forum, interestingly, on May 3rd, just released a new report around the top 10 most in-demand skills, and 9 of the 10 are now durable skills, according to the World Economic Forum. This is just 2 years old. What's happening is as you request, as employers are asking for less degrees, so a lot of folks are familiar with skills-based hiring. We'll talk a little bit about that as it moves forward. When you remove a skill from a job description, Harvard just did a study. What happens is you put a lot more durable skills into the job description when you take the degree out. The 4-year degree now, almost more than anything, because as David mentioned, we're losing faith in what a 4-year degree can do. 4-year degree is still the absolute best proxy to demonstrate that you have durable skills. So a lot of bots, a lot of other things that are, when you have a whole bunch of job descriptions going through, they keep throwing the 4-year degree at the top of the pile because we can't validate a lot of the durable skills that folks have. And that's something that we're really excited to take on and address as we move forward. So a little bit about Tennessee. This is all in the report that you guys have. There are 1.6 million job postings in Tennessee from, so this is not 22 data. So this is 20 and 21 data was the last that we looked at. Across 22 sectors, 76% of those. So 1.2 million Tennessee jobs require durable skills. And here's what that looks like. So if you look at, this is really difficult to read, I apologize. So on the left-hand side of this, what you're seeing is the number of postings with 3 or more durable skills in the posting. And on the right-hand side, you're seeing the percent of postings with 3 or more durable skills. We consider any job description that asks for 3 or more to be sort of super users or people who have a high demand for these types of skills. Some of the companies you can see, these are just based on Tennessee jobs. So that, when they're hiring for Caterpillar or State Farm or anything else, we didn't look at that. This is just so you can see the percentage of folks that were asking for this. What's interesting, when we went back and shared this with a lot of employers, they said, how the hell did you know that? Like they've never considered looking at this in aggregate as sort of what the percentages are and how much, what the demand of this is. Interestingly, my hotel room key had a picture, it was an identification card from Dolly Parton on it. And Dollywood is one of the most in-demand employers in the state who is requesting durable skills as well. So I pulled that up just because I thought it would be fun. So you can see, right? There's just, this all makes so much sense when you start to think about it, right? What kind of things are employers looking for? And now we have the data and the analytics to prove and to go back and share. So when you start talking between systems, education systems, higher ed systems, workforce systems, this is the type of stuff that folks are looking for. This is what's going to help kids advance and have family sustaining wages, to be able to have economic mobility, decrease equity across the state. So again, this is the gap that we try to solve for at America Succeeds. The work we do is to bridge that gap. The demand side, we go to the demand side, what do you all need? We go back to the supply side and we try to work with them to try to make sure that there's an alignment in how this is working. So the next piece of this, actually, I'm going to say another thing about the last slide before I jump to this. One of the things that's really amazing about this work is it's pretty clear that employers are looking for this. And the education system is really struggling on how to address or respond to that. And so we've had conversations where we've had, one of my favorite examples of this is we had a state superintendent, district superintendent on stage, an employer in the audience, and the employer said, can you please just spend more time teaching critical thinking skills? And the superintendent said, we're expected to do so much in education. Absolutely true, super valid. We have to get rid of some of the other things before we add other things. I agree entirely with that. But one of the things that they then said is there's just not enough time in the day to add a critical thinking course. There's so many other things that we have to do. To which the employer said, I don't think you think critically from 11 to 11:50 and then go to math. And we've created this, right? This is self-inflicted. These are Carnegie units. This is the way that we've created the system. This is right. So this is not an easy discussion. And it is not asking those educators, we should not be asking the educators to do more. We should be asking them to do different. And once we started having these conversations, this is where we have very little expertise, but a math teacher came to us and said, after we were talking about this for a while, we said, please share examples. What would this look like? How might this happen? And she said, okay, I can take a group of 3 kids, give them a group of math problems, ask them to solve those math problems multiple ways, using different problem solving techniques, trying to figure out the answer to that. And then I can ask those 3 kids to go to the front of the class and present their problem solving back to the rest of the class. And as a math teacher, I've just had my kids collaborate, think critically, problem solve, practice their presentation skills and their communication skills. And I can do that whether I'm teaching fractions or whether I'm teaching geometry or whether I'm teaching calculus. And so part of the work that America Succeeds is trying to get after is, if you go in and you create different types of curriculum, this will never get done. But what are the prompts? What are the things that teachers can get? How do they start to see it in their classroom and start to come up with their own ways of teaching these skills in the classroom, where the kids know what terms, know what skills they're practicing, knows what those terms are. So when they see the names of those terms again, they can put it all together and they can say, tell me the last time you collaborated. And they know exactly what an example of that looks like. and why that's going to be relevant for them down the road. And that's the exciting part of this, right? Is that this should not be as controversial as so many things that are happening in public education. This is pretty basic and extremely valuable for these young people who we want to be able to get into the workforce as they move on. So then how do you start to do some of this? So we partnered, so of all the folks that we talked to, CompTIA is the Computer Technology Industry Association. CompTIA is the second largest certifier of technical skills behind Microsoft. So if anybody's ever heard of a Python Plus certification or Cybersecurity Plus or anything along those lines, you get that certification from CompTIA. Highly valued, highly respected in the tech space. And what CompTIA said to us when we were asking about these skills is they said, we're asked constantly whether the kids, young people, job seekers, who earn our certificates can actually do the other stuff like collaborate and do some of those things, because now we're not putting the tech folks in the basement like we used to. They're not working alone and just coding they are working with the client. They are having to do all kinds. And they said, can we validate that you have both durable skills and technical skills? Now you're super invaluable to an employer. And so CompTIA is working with us. And what we've just recently done with CompTIA is the first part of creating any way to assess is to create a rubric and a common lexicon. So does everybody agree what critical thinking means? Or here's a great one that's on there is risk analysis. So we started asking dozens and dozens of employers. We brought folks together to help us come up with that. And you would have somebody on a factory floor who said, no, risk analysis to me is being able to judge whether that machine with moving cogs, like how do you interact with it? But then the accountant said risk analysis is knowing which numbers to move from one column to another. The practice of risk analysis is the same. The application of how you do that is different. So you could actually be able to assess these skills pretty easily across all types of industries. And CompTIA wants to come up with an assessment that they use for the workforce, starting with tech. And we've already been asked by manufacturing, hospitality, just name any industry. Can we have some version of that once you're able to validate those types of things? So I got a little bit ahead. This is the folks that we brought together to start to look at creating those. Then what we did is we took that rubric and we shopped that around and we brought it to over 800 employers. We did regional events around the country. We did CompTIA sent it out to all of their members. These are fun because we work with a lot of companies. We're starting to work with the really big companies, the one that everybody recognizes every one of these logos. The demand is enormous. And we're getting the type of feedback that when all of these companies are asking for the same thing and agree on the same type of definitions and agree that you can actually assess and validate this, and somebody would be able to show up after taking an assessment, and it's more like a strength finder the way that we're approaching this. You never master these skills. You work on these skills your entire life. So we had to pick a point in time, and we looked at 20 to 24-year-olds. And if they can validate that they have these skills at the beginning of their career, and they can match it with any technical skills, we feel like they're employable. We feel like we can get them into the workforce and we can move them through. So whatever that looks like in terms of the technical skills that they show up with, if you don't have to have that 4-year degree to validate the durable skills, there's real opportunity. And interestingly, I'll share 8 states have removed the 4-year degree requirement from state jobs. So except where explicitly required. I actually think that that's the tip of the iceberg. These states have not done this because they want greater equity and opportunity. Georgia was the last one to do it. I know that they're as a neighbor and there's some competition. What they said flat out, 25% of their state jobs turned over within 1 year last year. They've got that kind of turnover. They can't afford to just say the only thing they're going to hire is a 4-year degree. There's not enough anymore. The workforce is tightening, not enough kids are going through. In Colorado, one of the states that also did this, the governor just said, each agency, agriculture, transportation, commerce, can figure out how they want to do hiring without a 4-year degree independently, and each agency can do it on their own. I don't have a ton of faith in government agencies, but asking them to figure out how to do hiring without giving them the tools to be able to analyze whether somebody has these skills or they don't have these skills seems like a really difficult way for them to go out and address and identify talent, and also to make sure it's equitable. So these are the types of tools that we're really excited about and that are coming. So let me see if I can wrap this up. What does implementation look like? We can dig into this a little bit in Q&A maybe, but one of the things we're super excited about are some states that have portraits of a graduate, whether they have it at a district level or whether they have it at a state level, depending on local control, but that the community comes together and says, this is what we want somebody to look like when they leave our school. Having that portrait. What's interesting is if the community comes together and says, this is what we want somebody to look like, you got to go back and change the way that the kids are experiencing that system to make sure you look like the portrait at the end. There is a state that has 6 durable skills embedded in their portrait of a graduate. It's a great portrait of a graduate. And we said, how are kids going to look like this? And their answer was, our portrait is a flat Stanley. Nobody will ever look like that portrait based on what's happening in our school system. But we have a really good portrait of what we want kids to look like. And I think that's the work that states can begin doing now, is start to figure out and agree, if we want somebody to look like a certain way by the time they graduate, we're going to have to do something different while they're in our education system. So thank you. I appreciate your attention, your interest in this. I'm thrilled for what's going on in Tennessee. Applaud you. Super excited about Lizette Reynolds coming your way. She's a great dear friend, and you guys have got a great community of advocates. Victor, David, thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Tim. We're going to open it up for questions. I have one that I'm going to start out with, and then we'll open it up for questions that anybody here has. And we just ask, if you have a question, feel free to just stand up, and one of the SCORE team members will find you and bring a mic. Tim, I want to maybe just build on some of the last points that you just raised, and ask if you could talk a little bit more about what does it literally look like to teach some of these durable skills within our education system. I'm thinking about, we have folks who are here who are working in the K-12 space, folks who are working in the higher ed space. If I'm a superintendent or a school principal in Tennessee, what should I be doing? What should I be thinking about as a next step around this work? If I'm a community college leader or a 4-year college leader or a technical college leader in the state, what literally should I be doing? I think maybe just some examples of what this specifically looks like in practice.
Yeah.
Would love to hear.
So that rubric that I mentioned, if you go back to so the rubric that I mentioned is actually looks at all 110 of these terms, and it identifies developing, approaching, proficient, and exceeding for each level. And that's what we've asked the 800 employers. Did we get this right? And primarily, if what you're looking for is everybody to hit some certain mark, this is the expectation of what somebody should be able to know or do by the time they're 20 to 24 years. First, just entering that first real job was what we were trying to characterize as that. We will now, by July, we will have had the sign off of these 800 companies, shared definitions, employer-driven. Interestingly, when we ask K-12 if these are the right definitions, they think that they're way off. You couldn't ask kids to be able to do this. These are way too difficult. And you go ask employers and they're like, spot on. So starting with employers, we feel, is critical. But then once you have a rubric, you can actually start to build assessment, you can start to build content, you can start to build prompts, you can start to build professional development. And this is right where we are at our work. We want to create a community of practice. We would love Tennessee to be part of this community of practice. We don't know. The teachers, as soon as they get a hold of this, the prompt example that I gave you in the math class, there are teachers that have started hanging. We can send somebody a copy of this as a poster, and we've gotten story after story of people hanging this poster in the class and asking kids to practice these skills, or the teacher will just go up and pick one of these skills and embed it in one of the things that they're teaching. We don't have the slightest as to what that looks like. But if we could bring teachers together to start thinking about what prompts look like, to start good professional development, to start embedding this in classroom, we think there's an opportunity. We love branding things probably even better than we like creating the work behind them. But we've thought about a community of practice for community colleges, community squared. Bring some community colleges together. Community colleges are ideal to pair technical skills with durable skills and have their graduates be ready for the workforce. So if community colleges would come together and start thinking about what this looks like in their courses, that would be really powerful as well. So we have both higher ed, K-12, and then ultimately, once the employers can use this as an assessment, we think that that's sort of everybody talks about blurring the lines between those silos, and there's very few things that really do blur the lines across those silos. We think that this is one of the perfect spots to dig in.
Great. All right, we'll open it up for questions. Feel free to stand up or raise your hand if you have a question. And I have like 5 more questions I can ask. Yes, right there.
One of the things that has really taken hold in many states, but certainly Tennessee, is work-based learning. Can you just speak to maybe what you've heard or seen around how that could be an additional tool for embedding durable skills into K-12 and then into post-secondary?
And can I just ask, can you tell us who you are and
Oh,
what your
sorry.
organization? I should have said that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Stephanie Coleman with the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce.
Great question. We just attended a national conference and we were approached by a couple of work-based learning providers who are trying to create opportunities for more kids to have work-based learning experiences. One of the things that they shared with us is that if students have more than one work-based learning experience, which is the ideal scenario, that they have a couple of these, currently the way that they're being assessed through these providers is they said, we just use a 5-star rating for collaboration or for whether you can think critically or whatever. But we don't have common definitions. So they go to one experience and somebody says, oh gosh, your communication skills are not very good because they were using communication in a certain application. Then they go have another one and they get 5 stars. Well, now the person participating in work-based learning doesn't know whether they're good at communication or bad at communication. And really all of the employers who are participating aren't assessing things and aren't using them the same way. So just the lexicon itself, as we can start to get that out, we would love for more work-based learning providers to be able to use those. And so you can assess the same way. And then somebody coming out can say, based on this definition, we have some family friends and their kid is just starting to go into the workforce. And I said, you need at the top of your resume to put a skills section before you get into any of the other things, because your summer jobs and your 4-year degree is great, but let an employer know what you're really good at. Even if it's just a self-assessment, put some of those things across the top so you can go in and have conversations. And then when your employer says, give me an example of the last time you thought critically or solved a problem. And they can speak to those types of things. So we think that that is one of the most exciting pieces that we've done. And we keep hearing from a lot of folks that that would be enormous. So we feel a little bit like we're the dog that caught the car. We're not sure what to do with it, but we have this information and now the applications are a little overwhelming. We sort of need to start to narrow this, but with partners or with other folks.
Hi, I'm Amy Galloway. I'm the executive director of Pivot, and I'm curious about alignment with curricular materials for K-12. So thinking about movements around implementing high quality instructional materials. When we look at these skills and we think about how these skills show up, if we look at the standards for mathematical practice, so many of these skills show up in those standards, right? So if we then think about curriculum development process and curriculum writing, there is a really amazing opportunity for alignment there. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts around how do we make that happen?
We have given some thought to this. We've been advised to not touch curriculum. There's so many different curriculum providers. Everybody buys from a different source. If you start to figure out that this is how you embed it in a specific curriculum, you're inevitably going to leave something out. Or if you say how to do it, somebody's going to say, I disagree. So a little bit of the Common Core problem, right? If you walk in with a 3-ring binder and you say, this is how you deliver, nobody wants to deliver that way. So we've been thinking more and more about trying to figure out through prompts and these other things that are organic and that the teachers start to see how they can embed it. The most important thing in our minds is that it is absolutely embedded in the content so that you can't separate it. So somebody on my team said it's like having a bite of broccoli, but not wanting the vitamins. Like, you're getting the vitamins when you have it, right? So like as you're having your experience in math or science or English, that we have made sure that we've been thoughtful about how to embed those skills in a lesson plan, but that the teachers are coming up with the best way to embed certain skills. States can go through and prioritize and say, look, you may not need all 10, pick 8, pick 5, or in different grades, or however a state might approach this. We're not that far along, but the idea of saying like, oh, we're going to approve or not approve curriculum, or here's how it has to go, was something folks were like, you don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. That's our initial thinking.
Mark, I'm the robot
It's
now.
contagious.
We'll try it.
I think I can speak loud enough that everybody can hear me. Gotta remember my question now. Oh, at the end of your presentation, you were saying that there were some states that have already began work similar to this. What kind of things have they been doing? Can you sort of elaborate on what they've done? Because I know even if you look at the team rubric, things that we use to evaluate teachers and the lessons they do, a lot of these things are in there. It's just the time element is such a big deal because we're pushing and pushing and pushing to get so much done in a day. And those things take time. I'm a CTE supervisor. We do a lot of hands-on, a lot of work in our classrooms. We're not under the pressure that a math teacher would be. So that there's a time element. I'm just curious what kind of things you've heard, because I think we've been trying to do these things. We've just not been successful at it.
I appreciate you saying that, and should emphasize there are some bright spots. It is not like it's not happening anywhere. A lot of CTE programs that have employer advisories have these pretty well baked into the programs. There's some really cool things that you can see when you go out and you go to some schools. Unfortunately, it's not across the board. It's not every student being able to get some of those experiences, and that's something we feel really strongly about. That every student needs these types of skills, whether you're going to go to 2-year, 4-year, directly into the workforce. So there are bright spots. Indiana is a state who has done a lot of thoughtful work around this. They have a dashboard that they want to make sure that some of this is happening. They actually just did a statewide grant to recognize and to hold up a number of practitioners around the state that are embedding employability skills, durable skills in different ways. And what's interesting, we've seen everything from an art school to teachers who are using some of these prompts and doing other things and sprinkling it in. Again, we wound up seeing a few of our posters in the classrooms in some of those schools. So making it a priority, making sure that when kids are already practicing those skills, they know what skills they're practicing and we're attaching the same language to it is really important. And there are a handful of other examples we can dig into that I can share with you. Indiana as a state, I would say, is probably one of the most advanced.
We have time probably for one more question. Yes, sir.
Michael, do you want to arm wrestle for it? I saw you raising your, oh. I thought Michael wanted to ask a question. So my name is Jack Powers. I'm with Excel and Ed. And first of all, thank you. This has been a great presentation. I guess my question, I know we have policymakers in the audience, and honestly, listening to you talk, I was reminded a little bit of conversations that I've been a part of in certain states around the science of reading, where you're talking about like, you're really going down past the course level, like grain size smaller. You're talking about teaching and learning and what the teachers are actually doing. You're talking about lesson planning. But then we also want all schools across the state to be doing this. So I guess my question is like, what's the cadence or what is the lever to pull at the state level? Are we talking about legislation to get this done? Are we talking about pilots, like specific districts that start this and then generate the evidence? I mean, how would you advise a state to actually systematically implement this in a meaningful and lasting way?
Thank you. For any of the policy wonks who want to dig in, durableskills.org has a map of all 50 states and an analysis of where the state is on college and career readiness standards and some of this work as it relates to durable skills, embedding in durable skills into the work. Tennessee's fair. Actually, Quentin Suffren from Excel in Ed created that map for us. So it's a incestuous group of the ed policy national folks. I was just looking, David shared some stuff with me on the way in. The SCORE's policy recommendations to strengthen and use connections between education and workforce data, embedding workforce and post-secondary metrics into Tennessee's accountability system, incentivize work-based learning programs across high school and post-secondary. The SCORE's got some great things that they're already out front of, and I think the idea is just to make sure that it's all baked in. I personally love anything related to a portrait of a graduate, because if the community comes together and says, this is what we want someone to look like, then you've already got the buy-in of everybody in the community that how the education experience to make somebody look like that portrait has got to change. So then you don't have to sort of fight with all of the granular level that you were talking about. You're just saying to get somebody to look like this, things are going to have to look different in classrooms.
Oh, hello. Please join me in thanking Tim for his time today and sharing this wonderful information. All right, so we're now going to turn to really thinking about what is this research and what do these findings look like for Tennessee? How do we put some of this into practice? So I'd ask our Tennessee leaders if you want to go ahead and join us up front. And I'm going to introduce our moderator for this panel this morning. So Tara Scarlett is President and Chief Executive Officer of the Scarlett Family Foundation. Tara will be facilitating this panel of Tennessee leaders to reflect on this information. Tara serves on SCORE's Board of Directors, is the chair of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, and previously served as the chair of the state's Education, Recovery, and Innovation Commission. Tara joined the Scarlett Family Foundation as president and CEO in 2016 and spent 20 years in marketing leadership roles for two of the largest consumer packaged goods companies worldwide, Coca-Cola Company North America and Mars Pet Care. Tara, thanks for being here and for moderating this panel. And I'll turn it over to you to introduce our panelists.
Thank you. No? Oh, there we go. Thank you, David. I'm excited to welcome this panel of Tennessee leaders. Thank you all very much for being here. I'm going to introduce each of you. First, we have Bob Eby. He's currently chairman of the Tennessee State Board of Education after serving 4 years as vice chair. He was appointed to the state board by Governor Haslam in 2018 to represent the 3rd Congressional District, following 16 years of service with over 30-year time period at the Oak Ridge Board of Education. Besides his ongoing service to the State Board of Education, Bob is currently a board member for KFI, a local organization dedicated to supporting the Ronald McDonald House of Knoxville. He's also on the Global Community Fellowship Board, a missionary board to support Mayan people in Mexico. Previously, Bob served as a board member for the Oak Ridge Chamber of Commerce and the East Tennessee Economic Council. Thanks for being here. Next, we have Dr. Sidney McPhee. He's the 10th president of Middle Tennessee State University. Since Sidney's presidency began in 2001, the university has been successful in adding over 50 undergraduate and graduate degree programs, 2 colleges, and about 20 institutes and centers, and completing more than $1.3 billion in improvements in academic, athletic, and campus facilities. It's no small undertaking. His previous service includes a number of positions at the Tennessee Board of Regents, Executive Vice Chancellor, Chief Academic Officer, and Interim Chancellor. He also served in the administration of the University of Louisville and the University of Memphis. Welcome, Sidney. Next up, Ms. Amity Schuyler is the Senior Vice President of Workforce Development for the Greater Memphis Chamber. In her current role, Amity is charged with creating alignment of academic institutions and workforce development organizations. Amity comes to the chamber with a long history of education with business community and 20 years of cabinet level and CEO roles in nonprofit, state, and local government sectors, including serving as the Chief of Strategy and Innovation for Shelby County Schools and Deputy Commissioner of Tennessee Department of Education and Chief of Staff and Chief of Strategic Communications for the school districts of Palm Beach County, Florida. Thank you, welcome. Last but not least, Dr. Keith Wilson serves as the Assistant Superintendent of Academics for Knox County Schools. In his role, Keith is charged with leading the district's initiatives related to learning and literacy, academic supports, and college and career readiness. Keith joined Knox County Schools in 2001 as a science teacher at Northwest Middle School and began his career in administration in 2009. He serves as the district's Teacher Advanced Program Director for 5 years before working as the Director of Professional Learning. In 2017, he was appointed Director of Career and Technical Education before becoming Assistant Superintendent of Academics in 2022. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome. An interesting conversation for sure. It was great to hear from both Tim and David this morning. I'll start this off with just a question for all of you. This is an interesting presentation, as I just mentioned. There's a need to get good jobs of today. What stood out most to you as education and workforce leaders in the state in the conversation this morning? How did the skills that Tim described match your view of skills you see needed today? Bob, why don't I start with you?
Sure. Well, first, I'm not an educator. I'm an engineer by training, and I've been in the industry for 50 years. So when you get in there, you see gone are the days of the autocratic boss. To be successful, you got to have collaboration, communication, teamwork. All those durable skills that Tim talked about are critical to success. Boy.
Sydney?
Actually, I was very, very much excited to hear that presentation. As university president, I've served on the Rutherford County Chamber Board. I've served 6 years in the Nashville Chamber. Actually served as chair of the membership committee. And the reason I did that was to connect with business and industry, find out exactly what they want to see in graduates from MTSU. And I'm pleased to see the work on the durable skills. Tends to be a tendency to focus just on the technical skills. Business and industries, those executives tell me, we can teach them our business. We want them to be able to think, able to work, interpersonal skills, et cetera. And so having heard that confirms what I've been hearing. And then finally, your point about the role of the 4-year education degree in being the best place to prepare students for those technical or durable skills, I think is really important. Not that the technical skills with the community colleges or the technical colleges don't teach those, but you'll hear some example later on how we integrate the durable and technical skills at MTSU.
Thank you. Amity?
Well, when Tim said, don't do more, do it differently, the Pentecostal upbringing in me wanted to stand up and say, preach, because I think we all acknowledge we've got to do it differently. But what really resonates is what I am hearing from the private sector, particularly our largest industries in Memphis, was that if the universities and schools are not going to give us what we need, then we will just start to pluck early. And so the devaluing of the 2-year and 4-year is happening at a pace that I think that we are not talking real about in rooms like this and across the state. I am seeing some of our biggest global companies go into engineering programs and pluck at year 2 with the message of, we can teach you everything that you need to know right now, to Dr. McPhee's point. Come and work with us so that you can learn our way, meaning you can develop those durable skills that we don't believe that you're going to get over these next 4 years, and then we will pay to have you go back to school. I worry that the devaluing of the degrees and the plucking of students and the eventual degree attainment of our Black and brown students, the eventual return to schools that are promised but never happen, they might not have been necessary, but in the tangible business, but necessary in life walk. And what that looks like for us 5 and 10 years from now is a great concern. And so being able to do something different now in the K-12 space is going to predict the future and value of who is holding that 4-year degree and what the value is 4 and 5 years from now is something that keeps us up at night. It does. Yeah.
Thank you. Keith?
I'll probably just build off what Dr. McPhee said, in that over time I've sat in a lot of rooms, a lot of conversations where employers are feeling the pinch that's present and right now of hiring quality employees and struggle at times to label, I think, where those gaps are in terms of that, beyond just sort of, I think what was mentioned, if they can show up on time and put their phone down, we can teach them everything they need to know. And so I think what really resonated with me from what he said is that idea that it really does require breaking down some of those silos and us all being on the same page in terms of how we name things and label things and define things as a community, so that if we are all aligned to a goal of students graduating from high school are now ready for contributing in a high value way that's good for them and good for our community, whether that's through continued education, continued training, straight to employment, whatever that may be. It's really important that we're all thinking about the same things and labeling things the same way in doing that work. And again, that takes time and a lot of collaboration and communication, all those skills that it takes to be successful, right? So
I think that common definition piece was very clear in what Tim was sharing earlier, and clear what you brought up there as well, what all of you have. Emily, I'll ask you a specific question. It's clear that Tennessee needs a skilled workforce as the economy continues to grow. Based on what you hear from Tennessee businesses, how are our K-12 and higher education systems preparing students with the skills needed for the careers in Memphis? And I'd also, if you have any perspective on the southwest area of Tennessee.
Well, I think that Tim's presentation captured what we're also seeing in our own regions in Tennessee, and that they're not. Employers will say in a room of educators, you're doing a great job with content knowledge. Like you clearly are teaching math well. They have all the basic competencies for the academic base, but they don't have the skills they need to be successful in the durable skill set. So decision-making, communication, the ability to resolve conflict and work with your peers, those are the gaps that are missing in the graduates, whether they're coming out of a technical program, a 2-year program, or a 4-year program. Those are the things that employers are saying that they're just not seeing. And they've watched this, and it didn't just happen overnight. This isn't a pandemic thing. They will tell you that they've watched this gradual decline in durable skills over the last 10 years. If you ask them to parallel it to any one event, they'll blame it on the cell phone, of course, but it's not. It doesn't matter what caused it. The reality is that we're here, and that is why they're reaching into programs and plucking early as a theory of action to meet their workforce demands. That is why they're thinking about creating their own high schools inside of their company businesses, so that they are guaranteed that their workforce has the mindset that they want. Our employers continue to be shocked that we're graduating students from 4-year programs that have never held a job. And they reject that as the only choice of their workforce. And this is the funny thing about the private sector. For those of you that know me, I was in education most of my career, and I've been in the private sector for going on 3 years now. They'll reject everything that we're doing and just create their own solution. First, if they're not at the table, first, if we're not asking for their input. And so we're very close to the precipice where they'll just start creating their own solutions that don't include academic systems if we don't do something differently.
And some are already doing that.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
in a big way.
Absolutely.
In a big way.
Cindy, let's go to you real quick. As David shared in his opening remarks, recent public opinion survey data indicates that Tennessee voters have concerns about post-secondary education's ability to equip students with the skills needed in the workforce. As a higher education leader, what do you think the responsibility of institutions, their leaders, their faculty is to ensure that the skills students are developing align with the skill industries leaders seek? And are there any gaps, or are there any programs that you're leading at MTSU that might bridge those gaps?
Yes, certainly. 22 years ago, when I became president, one of the first things I did was approach the chamber, the Rutherford County Chamber, and participated in a retreat, which resulted in developing Destination Rutherford. And you're familiar, and you've heard about that. And the idea was to hear from them what role the university should play in the economic development of the region. So it's critical that we listen and we reach out and engage business and industry as we prepare future workforce. I think MTSU has done a really good job, and other universities in the state are doing some good work. In fact, this report that just came out, Improving the Pipeline of Tennessee's Workforce by ECD, Education, THEC, and several groups, really have some good examples of that. But of MTSU, we have developed a tagline over the years called Preparing Students Ready to Work. Now, we merge the technical skills, the applied area, with the durable skills. To get a degree in aerospace engineering or mechatronics engineering or construction management, you have to take a general education curriculum that provides the opportunity for you to learn how to analyze, think, deal with interpersonal skills, et cetera. And we are getting great response from business and industry. Two examples. Delta just signed, about 3 years ago, a pact with MTSU to hire our pilots. And they're number one in this program called Propel. And the reason they said it came to MTSU rather than a flight training program was that not only were we teaching them how to be great pilots, we have over 900 students just in our professional pilot concentration, but the education that they bring with their technical skills, the same thing with our concrete and construction management program. And so, we all need to do a better job of that, but I think it's really critical that we stay close to the business and industry leaders. Things evolve, and most of the advancement, your cell phone, all of the technology, a lot of that came out of research from universities.
Thank you. Bob, let me go to you. The State Board of Education plays an important role in passing rules and policies that govern the state academic standards, coursework, graduation requirements, among other important aspects of how K-12 education prepares students for college and career. What steps is the State Board taking in rule and policy to promote greater workforce readiness for our students?
That's a good question. I heard something about a year ago that out of 100 students that enter kindergarten, only 8 of those end up going to four-year university. So our mission in the State Board is to prepare students for post-secondary success. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean that every student needs to go to a four-year university. So we continue to look at, how can we set our standards? How can we help the students determine what's the best path for them? So just recently, we have policy 2.103, which includes high school and beyond. And in the past, that says that every student by 8th grade would have a plan. And now we've changed that not a 4-year plan through high school, but a plan that goes 4 years plus 2, that takes them 2 years beyond high school. And that's a very important process, because what we do is we sit down, we give the students an aptitude test and an assessment of interest test. And then working with the counselors, the students, the parents, the teachers, hopefully we can guide the students what their interests are and what their aptitude is, and develop a curriculum for the 4 years of high school that will help them succeed post-secondary. So that's something that we're really working hard. I would like to see that high school and beyond, instead of starting in 8th grade, move down even earlier. But we have to be careful that we don't track students, because people change. But the process is good. It helps the student better prepare and working with, collaborating with workforces, what are the needs? What can we do to make that success? That's what we'll work on.
Make for interesting research to see how many of those dreams come true.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Keith, let me ask you a question. Knox County Schools recently launched career-themed academies in your high schools known as 865 academies. And one of the key components of these the academy's approach is to create stronger connections between classroom knowledge and workplace success. Just turned into a robot. Can you share with us about how you worked with the greater Knoxville community to develop the vision for these academies and what it means to be 865 ready?
So 865, if you're not,
Pages.
it's going to be,
Yeah.
I've got it
Brown's
too.
teacher.
865, if you're not familiar with the Knoxville area code, also spells vol, go Vols.
Good to know.
That being said, as we thought about our high schools and thought about the potential impact of our students on the region, it was bigger than just Knoxville and Knox County. So we tried to think about surrounding counties, Oak Ridge certainly, Anderson County, Loudoun County, those counties that are around us that also have opportunities for our students to succeed in the future. So first of all, that's the ground that in that. As we thought about that though, we talked about really a conversation that began around how do we transform our high schools. And we were, I would say 2017, having a conversation on how do we transform our high schools to increase the equity of opportunity that students have community to community. We're a kind of a unique community when you look at our high schools. We have rural, urban, suburban high schools that are spread across about 100 square miles of jurisdiction, if you will. And those communities all have very distinct kind of experiences and desires. And so when you start to look at that and to look at size of schools, things like that, whether a student ever had access to an AP class or had access to, other advanced academic opportunities, potentially on a post-secondary campus, things like that, very different from school to school. When you looked at the concentration of career and technical education coursework and what students have access to, very different from school to school. And so our goal was never to have a welding program in every building, right? But at the end of the day, it was to ensure that there's value in those experiences of being able to extend yourself academically and do that. And so trying to expand that to more campuses. And to do that, again, you have to engage the community. So what you said about employers and industry folks being at the table at the beginning of the conversation is a very important factor in that. So we had a series of about 4 planning meetings that happened over about a 6-month period. We worked with Ford Next Generation Learning. I would be remiss to not label the fact that the academy structure, we're leaning into that organization for support. They've worked with the Metro Nashville academies for a long time. I've had colleagues and friends in the Rutherford County, which has been mentioned here, that some of the work they've done was inspirational in this as well. So again, no genius on my part, just able to kind of connect the dots. But through that, the community meetings, we had about 150 people that came together over a series of 3 meetings, parents that were in the high schools that were willing to pilot this work with us, teachers that were part of those high schools, definitely business and industry partners, post-secondary partners, even students that sat on those groups. And our first charge was to develop a portrait of a graduate for what does it look like for a student to come out of a Knox County high school and be successful. And so you can see a lot of parallels to the things he was talking about in terms of language. And we are trying to use that as our anchor point as we move forward. We also recognize that 3 years from now, we probably have that group coming back together to think about it again, and to continue to ensure that it's meeting the need and that we're building things that get us there. Quite honestly, listening to Tim talk, there's lots of work to do. I mean, we've launched this past year 7 high schools and then 8, really one that kind of came into the work that was doing some parallel work. But 8 high schools that are finishing the freshman academy, the first year of that cohort of kids who will now move and have selected to move into career academies for this next year. And so we're very much on the front end of that and already looking at, kind of that freshman experience and things we do through a freshman seminar course and how those can be modified. Certainly are looking at those types of frameworks and things for students that have been mentioned here already as part of how we label and name and think about the skills that are part of that work.
When you created the portrait, and the 120 some odd durable skills that were listed in that round.
Yeah, we missed a few. I'll
Yeah.
work on it, yeah.
But do you find that the portrait really is defined using the durable skills language? And
Certainly, I mean, there's a lot of parallel. Our big, and again, I can go very detailed, but our big kind of 5 areas, it sounds cliche, but to talk about lifelong learners, but really what that's about is, do we have the academic basis, and then can we then use our own interests to explore and expand our abilities and do that? Effective communicator, and also thinking about the modes of communication, writing and speaking, and then even using technological platforms, digital video creation, things like that. Can I collaborate, work as a teammate, share responsibility, those sorts of pieces. Being a creative problem solver who can deal with and analyze information and use that to create solutions. And then being community minded. So I see that back into leadership and how do I contribute to my community. So those are the big 5 pieces of that portrait.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. David shared at the top of the session that we truly need to think about whether we have access to the right data and information to best align education with workforce needs. The study by America Succeeds gave us great data and information that we would not otherwise have. But here's a question for all of you. Is there additional data or information that would be helpful to guide either you in your current work or peers that you know to help better align education and workforce, especially as we move into an increasingly skill-based economy? I'll let whoever wants to answer first go.
I'll kick us off from a private sector standpoint. So 2 things. From the private sector, Tim said it best, the jobs and roles that will exist 5 years from now don't have names yet. And the skill sets that go into those jobs and roles are still being developed. So our, large corporations in particular that are on the cutting edge of research, medical device, R&D, artificial intelligence, they want to know now what kids are ideating about for their future so that they can speak resources and truth into education spaces to get them thinking more future forward and not about being Batman, right? So about 3 years old, you realize you can't be Batman. And somebody, somewhere, whether it's a parent or an educator, pivots your thinking to be something. And the things that we're always pivoted to think about being are terminal end destinations: fireman, nurse, doctor. Most corporations would tell you now they need kids to learn how to think bigger than that. And they will support academic spaces in helping them think bigger if they can get a better feel by middle school, to Bob's point, about what they're ideating and being, so that they can think about how they need to start pivoting academic classrooms, ideations of teachers and students into future forward thinking. So if I have a survey right now, which I do from Memphis Shelby County Schools, that tells me that 60% of students are really thinking about X, and that job is going to be expired in 5 years in my region, we know as a private sector that we got a lot of work to do really quickly to get those 60% of kids thinking about something else, and the district as well, before they graduate high school, because what we want to stop doing as a region in Tennesseans is exporting our talent and keeping it local, right? So more data that helps us define how we need to partner with school districts would be helpful. And then I think ultimately as a state, we've got to get really skinny on what is the best measure for a functioning, productive CTE program. We don't have it. It's very squishy. Is it experience? Do I bounce around 5 pathways to get experience, and that's the measure of an effective CTE program? I can tell you that confuses the hell out of the private sector. Like their expectation of a CTE program, and I'm not saying it's the right expectation, I'm just saying we have no real measure of what a productive CTE program is. And so, but their expectation is that you're coming out with a credential that industry recognizes, because that's a common language that at least level sets competencies and knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And so getting skinny as with the private sector at the table with educators about the measure of how we define effective CTE experiences in Tennessee is a really important piece of deciding what data is important to collect, deciding on what the benchmarks are for success from district to district, and then how we, stabilize equitable access to those programs moving forward. I'm sorry, that was a very long answer.
I would add that we all know that policymakers good data helps to inform and make great decisions and plan for the future. And about maybe 5 years ago, MTSU worked with the technology business in the area to develop a data science institute that would generate information not only to help the university, but also give the companies the opportunity to tell us what certificates and programs they need in order for them to continue to be successful. And I think studies like this, I found this to be very helpful. It gives update, and TX was involved with the production of this, but really help me as a university president, working with my colleagues as we develop academic programs that align with the needs of business and industry that I think gives us a good roadmap. In addition, I do think we also need to have opportunities for conversation, focus groups, to look at the demographics that will help as we develop these programs so we don't. We need to balance, I think, the whole idea of the technical skills and what the resources we put in technical skills with the durable skills. In other words, I'm concerned about the pendulum swinging too far in one direction and not having that balance, because the future technology advancement and economic development of a country or a state depends on the entire educational system, technical colleges, community colleges, and universities. And quite frankly, I'm a bit concerned about what I'm seeing in Tennessee with regards to maybe over focus on just the technical. We do need that. Manufacturing businesses are important. We have an incredible mechatronics engineering program. We partner with a lot of the companies, but you also need to have, rather than being the big box, you want to produce students and workers who are going to generate knowledge, not just. So that would be a piece of advice for policymakers in the state that I would recommend, that we take a look to make sure we have a balance as we prepare our students, both in the high schools, the technical colleges, the community colleges, and universities.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think from a K through 12 perspective, we need to use one of those durable skills of collaboration, collaborate with industry to determine what are those high wage, high demand areas, so that we can set our CTE program. I see Chairman Sapicki out there in the audience, and recently we just passed the TISA funding bill, which includes CTE classes and CTE for high wage, high demand areas we want to look at. Every year, the state board goes through, and we just recently approved some more CTE classes, but we also removed CTE classes because there was not the demand there, and that was using resources that we could be used someplace else. So I think that collaboration, that interface between industry and education is critical. Another part of it is, I think is important, is it's regional. So the demands in the urban areas is different than the demands in the rural areas. So data that we need is within those particular regions, where those CTEs, where those TCATs are, what are the high demand, high wage areas there that would provide us the data, then help us in K through 12 and through the assessments decide what are the best courses that we can provide to meet industry's needs.
If I could just tag on to what was said about, Dr. McPhee said about not going so hard and fast on technical skills, mechatronics, robotic repair, and thinking about the learning and the research and how that sort of creates this intersection of an economy of innovation. It's the durable skill experience that happens in the K-12 space, really, where students are taught to explore, to question, to think, to collaborate, that really spurs our entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And if we go too hard on the technical, we choke out that piece. There is nothing more important to the state of Tennessee than becoming and continuing to drive an economy of innovation. And so there does have to be that balance of the technical skills. I'm going to learn how electricity and mechatronics works, but also creating that space that starts in the K-12 space of questioning and problem solving and research and development, so that as I go into whatever program or post-secondary opportunity I'm going into, there is this opportunity to birth more things that allows us to be a state that creates and owns the most patents from Tennesseans, to attract those companies that are looking to plant for research and innovation. And that doesn't just happen at R1 universities. If you kind of sniff out some of the best utilities and innovation in the United States, they started in technical schools and community colleges and garages, not in R1 universities. Also important to our economy, by the way. And so I want to kind of put a pin in that. As you thread the needle in durable skills, you're also threading the needle as a down payment on your economy of innovation.
And I'd like to give a specific
It's going to be a whole
example of that.
Sorry, David.
Yeah, that's all right. I'd like to give a specific example of that. It's one of the reasons why when Ralph Schultz asked me to join the chamber, I agreed, because I was concerned about this imbalance. I've been around long enough to know when the state was recruiting Dell. There were two areas of Dell that they had out on the market that they were looking for relocation: the big box, and then the R&D. One of the reasons why Tennessee, Nashville didn't get the R&D was because of these durable skills, science, the research. They decided to stay in Austin, Texas, because of UT Austin and the universities around that area. And obviously it was a great thing that we got the packing up of it. But you see, when you look at the level of jobs, the high paying jobs, we need to make sure that we just don't box ourselves too, no pun intended about the boxing.
Literally.
Yeah, so that's something that continues to be of concern.
Yes.
One of the comments that was made with regard to how do you bring the durable skills into the classroom, you can't teach a class in durable skills. And it made me remember last week I participated in a function, Oak Ridge Public Schools Education Foundation gave grant awards. Those grant awards, one of them was for planting a garden. One of them was for building the first fixed wing aircraft. One of them was coding robots. And like planting a garden, they're learning food production, they're learning, how plants grow, et cetera. But they're using those durable skills of collaboration, teamwork that you're talking about. These are critical things. And so there are ways within K through 12 and project-based learning outside of the textbooks that brings those durable skills. And
I would add to that, like things like CTSOs. So I think those organizations that get students out in competitive environments, in authentic projects, in authentic work, some of what you're talking about with the gardens and things like that, are great opportunities. But it all does come back to, the idea that you can't teach it is true, but at a point you do have to teach it, and you have to say, this is what it is, this is why we do it, and this is how we're incorporating it over time. And that's just as true for teaching the teachers that as it is to teach the students. Just quickly on your question about data, I think probably for us, again, there are lots of great systems and lots of great ways that the state tracks data. If I was going to make a suggestion to policymakers and the folks that are in charge of all that is, again, one of the reasons we remain siloed, I think, in our practice sometimes is because of the systems that exist where the data is held. And it can be quite cumbersome to try as a high school counselor or as a district leader to access data that belongs at the post-secondary level. You think about the way students are tracked, the way that kids move from K to 12 into post-secondary at the state level, and our ability to lose kids along the way, kids that move straight into employment, going back to, what's a high-quality CT program? A lot of that's labeled through federal Perkins dollars that drive practice and drive funding, and they expect us to track kids. I'll tell you how we do that. Teachers look them up on Facebook, okay? That's the reality. Like if you can't find them from, they were reported back by Pellissippi State that they enrolled 6 months after graduation, teachers are looking them up on Facebook. So that tells me we don't have the systems we need to know where kids are and to be able to speak to persistence. Everything we talked about in transforming the high schools was about the great opportunities we have in Tennessee to take 2 years of technical school for free. Some of our high schools can go to the University of Tennessee for free. You've got Hope Scholarships. You've got everything in the world that creates access points from a funding standpoint to post-secondary. But kids go, they don't know why they're there. They don't know what their focus is. They come home at Thanksgiving and never go back, right? And so when we think about what we hope we're adding value to the system with, it's about a clearer path and a clearer vision for why am I going here and why did I choose this community college or program over this one? And now how do we measure that, right? How do we know we're having that impact on the back end?
Tara, this conversation just took off. It was awesome. Will you all join me in thanking our amazing panelists for this great discussion? Thank you, Tara. Just to close our time together, 2 quick points that are top of mind for me, just in thinking about the conversation we've heard today. One, I think this point was made earlier that bringing durable skills and in-demand technical skills into both K-12 and higher education, I think is going to take probably a lot more collaboration than we're currently seeing, and perhaps new ways of thinking about engaging business and industry in conversations that are happening both in K-12 and in higher education. And the second thing that I think sort of came out of the conversation today in many ways too is perhaps getting a little clearer on what our shared goals and vision are as a state or as regions of a state in this work as well. I think being clear about where we want to go in terms of what skills we're seeking to build will help us get closer to achieving that vision. We just need to be, I think, perhaps clearer on what those common goals are and what data we're tracking to meet them. So just in closing, want to say, as we mentioned at the beginning, this is the first of 5 conversations we're going to have around better connecting education and work. I'll just note that our next session will be next month, June 21st, where we'll look specifically at a K-12 piece of this puzzle and look at innovative high school models that are leading to jobs. We'll be joined by Dr. Pamela McHugh of the Rhode Island Nurses Middle College, which I think is one of the most innovative high school models in preparing students for work. Thank you all again for being with us. Tim, thanks for sharing just really interesting and insightful information. Tara, thank you for moderating a really interesting panel discussion, and to our panelists for your knowledge and wisdom today. And thank you all for being with us. We are adjourned. Thank you.